I'm going to tell you this story here. Um, and I'm going to try not to cry.
Oh
And
wow.
hopefully I don't because I've told this story a handful of times now. My home club is a comedy club based out of Akron, Ohio, Cuyahoga Falls, but right outside Akron, called the Funny Stop Comedy Club. And the owner, Pete, when I first started doing stand up, I waited about almost 4 years to go there because I had heard like he heckles comedians, he he busts your balls, all these things, and I was like, I don't know if I could handle that. Um, Knowing what I know now, I'm kicking myself every single day that I never went back there from the beginning, you know, consistently from the beginning because he turned out to be one of my all-time favorite people in
Mm.
life. Uh, his wife Nadal is a saint. His boys are intelligent young men. Um, his one played football semi-professionally, American football. Um, the other one is finishing up med school. Brilliant young man. And as you got to know Pete, he was a trip, man. And yeah, he would heckle you, and there were things about the funny stop where it was like the owner heckles you. There's no doors to the bar, so every once in a while, in the middle of your punchline, they would be doing a mixed drink, and as you're going to say the big joke, the blender goes off and you can't hear it.
Mm.
There were so many things that it's like this would be a terrible place, but it was all magic and
It
it
was the
all fit.
atmosphere.
It was, and it's my favorite place to be on earth is at that club. And I worked my way up to that club. I did the amateur contest. I I emceed, which is the guy opening up the show. Then
Mm.
he bumped me up to co-feature, so me and someone else doing 15 minutes. And then he bumped me up to feature, which is me doing 20 to 30 minutes. And then he bumped me up to co-headline, so me and another comedian would trade off nights, headlining. Then he bumped me up to headlining the off nights, like on a Thursday or a Wednesday. And then he bumped me up finally last year to the headliner spot, my own weekend
Yeah.
headlining. Um, Friday night, normal Pete, come in there, busting your balls, you know, having fun. He had a thick Lebanese accent, so if I, you can't talk about Pete without talking in his voice. Dan Brown, let's get some people in here. Dan Brown, you gay? Uh, just who he was. Um, and Friday night had two good shows, and then uh, Saturday night comes around, and I get there, and I always get places early. I was like an hour early because I'm paranoid about
Yeah, yeah.
that. And they're like, Pete had to be taken to the hospital today. Nadal had to take him. And we've known Pete for a while, and there were times like his blood sugar got low, and you're like, oh man, that sucks. I hope he's okay. They're like, yeah, his neck was swelling, and he was complaining about a headache. You're like, oh, that's weird. That's different. And first show, audience wise, was great. Okay, but amongst me and the other comedians that showed up were feeling down because a very important man to us
Yeah.
was not doing well. Not even midway through the first show, his brother, who works in the kitchen, leaves to go to the hospital. And that's when we
Okay.
realize
This
things
is
are not good.
serious.
Um, and all of us are waiting on updates. And then during the late show, um, my feature is on stage. He's doing his sales pitch. So he's got like 3, 4 minutes left in his act,
Mm.
kind of thing. And we had received word at the time that Pete passed away. And we're crying and hugging. And it's one of those things where um, one of the most important people in my comedy career, and quite frankly in my life, died.
Mm.
And now in 3 minutes, you have to wipe away your tears and go on his stage at his club and go do 45. Go do 45 minutes. The audience that night was incredible. Um, it was cathartic. I I'm getting goosebumps here. I get off stage. One of my buddies is like, "Okay, we may have been told the wrong thing. We don't know if he's alive or dead." So imagine I'm on stage thinking he's dead the whole time,
Yeah.
finding that out. Um, we found out that night he went brain dead and he was on a ventilator and they're trying to get family in. They're trying to get family in from Lebanon. His son was in Lebanon when this happened. So they're trying to, keep him alive for family to come in. People say their goodbyes. Um, and he died. He officially died a few days later. But I take a couple things away from that weekend. One of them, somebody had to point out to me that I was what he wanted his club to be. And not just me, but there are other comedians, but his last weekend on Earth was a comedian that went to his club and started on amateur night and worked his way up the ranks. And that was what he wanted his club for. Um, and then he would uh he would do this thing where he would walk away like mid conversation and then come back and have another conversation. And it doesn't matter what me and you are talking about. We're talking about what he wants to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
get you.
and you know, we would be talking. He comes up and goes, these comedians, they don't appreciate shit. I say, fuck them, and then walks away and then comes back. I got to tell you about my dog, and
Hmm.
totally different feel. And he was also known for just leaving without saying bye to anyone. So um, that day, I called into the radio station to, plug the shows. And they're like, "So, you got any good Pete stories?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got plenty of Pete stories." But, I'm like publicly, I'm never gonna actually mock the man. I know a lot of people make fun of the voice and everything, and it's easy and it's
You
fun.
do it out of love. It sounds like you do it
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
love.
Oh, I do. And because I mean, I got plenty of stories with the guy where right after my wife and I got engaged, I went there and I bring her and the headliner that weekend walks in. He goes, "This is Dan Brown. He's a very funny comedian." And you're like, "I love this. This is going to be his wife. She make big mistake." Um,
I'm sorry, but that's funny. That is
it's
funny.
he was the funniest dude, man. So at one point when he's walking away and coming back, he goes, "Dan, I heard you said something nice about me on the radio." And I'm like, "Of course, Pete, I love you and I appreciate you." And he said, "Thank you." And that was the last thing we said to each other.
Was that, how do I say this without being horrible? Are you glad that that was the last thing you said to him? Are you like, thank God that was the last conversation we got to have?
In a way, yes, because I know he would get hot-tempered with some comedians. Because, and
Hmm.
there was one time, actually, a few months earlier, and it's one of these things that I regret that I didn't do something
Mm.
because he made it so much fun to interact with him. Some comedians would take advantage of him.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, let's say in wrestling terms, um, let's say you walk into a locker room and Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns are going back and forth, cracking jokes on each other. Let's just say, hypothetically. And then in walks Enzo Amore, hypothetically. And then he tries to crack a joke. And it's like, hey, he can say that about me. I can say that of him. You ain't a part of this.
Yeah.
You're at the bottom of the totem pole here, buddy. Um, and I saw a bunch of comedians do something, and I came close to snapping, and I'm really mad I didn't. Me from a few years ago probably would have went off on a couple of them and went, "How dare you disrespect this man and his club?"
Yeah.
Because how many of these other clubs are giving you guys the opportunity that he is right now? And for you to come in here and disrespect him, like I was furious. Um, I am grateful that that was kind of the last conversation that we had. Um, I've seen comedians walk out there angry with him, both of them, "Fuck you," and then something happens to one of them, and that's the last thing you say.
Mm.
When I was in elementary school, they had some kind of speaker come in, and they said the last thing you should tell your parents every night is you love them because you never know what's going to happen. That stuck with me. So last thing I tell my kids every night is that I love them. You know, even when I'm in conflict with siblings or parents, want to let you know I love you.
Mm.
So, um, uh, I'm grateful that it was. Selfishly, I wish we had more time with him. Uh,
Mm.
um, his wife, like I said, is a saint, a wonderful, wonderful woman. Um, but I mean, it does give me a little bit of peace knowing that, hey, he was thanking me for something else, but his last words to me during the weekend that I headlined his club were thank you, and my last words to him was being able to tell him I appreciate him.